What is up, guys? Wraec is here with a new video, and today with a long-awaited video actually. People have been asking me about this ever since I announced it, but I really needed a few days off to get all of those testing together, to get my results together, to have enough room in my head to think about the math behind it. But we have done it now. It is ready. It is the armor video. This beautiful stat here, armor. This is something that I did a lot of testing to. We will talk about it in the time we talk about it. Also, of course, armor break will be a topic, sources of all of that and how it plays together, that will be a topic. We will have a little bit of math in there, but mostly I want to show you the formulas. I will give you some Excel sheets at hand that you can use to calculate stuff if you want it. And if you're not into calculating stuff, and if you don't want to deal with the math, then this video is still something for you, because you will get some valuable information that you can take away, some general guidelines, some rules to armor that will help you understand armor better, get a better grasp of what's going on in the game without having to deal with all the calculating, because often enough, an idea of what is a lot of armor, what is not a lot of armor, and what do certain things do, what does it do if I level up a hero, for example. You can understand that without knowing the math, and you can take that away from this video. So, first of all, regarding the release of this video is or was, depending on the time when you see this, first released as a members only video. If you want to support what I'm doing here, my videos in general, then you feel free to become a member of the channel. You will get access to such videos in advance. Sometimes they are exclusively released for members, and get a nice role on my Discord as well. So, that being said, let's hop into all of that. First of all, the general effect of armor. The general effect of armor is actually quite easy. It is a form of damage reduction. It is a damage reduction effect that reduces incoming damage from actives, passives, damage over time, and basic attacks. That being said, it is not the same as damage reduction. Those are two independent stats in the damage calculation. So it is not affected by the 75% damage reduction cap. Instead, it has its own cap of 90% that we will talk about a bit later in the video, about the cap and how you can see that there is a cap. So it is quite potent. 90% reduction of the damage you take, that can be quite substantial. So it is definitely something you should look into. And a fun fact, by the way, none of the armor in the game, if we check that out here, none of the armor in the game actually grants you any armor, which I found was quite weird and was something that I noticed during my testing, because it is called armor, but it doesn't grant you armor. Instead, in general, there are other sources of armor in the game that we can use. On Transcendence Heroes, for example, we have the imprints. There we have an armor imprint, quite a potent one, grants you 80% armor. Then we have Awakening bonus stats. There is also a bonus stat for armor here that is quite readily available even on low tier heroes. And then furthermore, we have the Gate of the Void. I was overbid in Auction House, doesn't matter at all, was not the hero that I wanted. There is also a hero, a new Starspawn, granting us 39.8% armor at this level. You can also amplify that, of course, with the Star Destiny buff. We have 132% here at the moment. You can get a lot more if you invest into it. So those are the first source of armor. Treasure Train. Don't know if I mentioned that. Maybe I will have to cut that out. We'll see. There is one for Warrior. We have a tier 27% for Warrior. That is some armor buff that we have. And there are some exclusive ones for Void Campaign where we can also get some more armor. And then we have Guild Tag as well. So those are in general the sources of armor that we have in the game. That being said, especially the new ones, especially Treasure Train and the new Star Spawns have had a huge impact on the armor that we have right now. For the first time ever, we see some really high armor heroes. We have some 8,529. Does he already have the armor perk? I don't think he has. Let's equip that. Oh, he already has it. Okay, I take it back. He already has the armor. And we, for the first time, see 10,000 armor plus heroes, which I, for the moment, don't have. But they are in the game. We will test some things against the one later in the game. We see 10,000 plus armor. We see heroes that have enough armor to reach the armor cap, the armor damage mitigation cap, and go even beyond that. And that is something that we see for the first time now, having more armor buffs in the economy. Not even talking about the armor buffs for campaign that we talked about, we didn't really talk about, that we didn't check out. There are multiple armor buffs in here as well that will be in effect when you battle heroes, and will certainly require some consideration when you plan out your damage reduction and your armor for such game modes. So to clarify a few things, I am talking about certain terms in this video. Not all of them are used in that way in the game. Armor, for example, is used in the game. Armor damage mitigation is a term you will not find in the game. Armor damage mitigation, when I use it, is used to describe the amount or the percent amount of damage that the armor level on a hero with that specific level reduces or mitigates. If I talk about effective armor damage mitigation, I mean the armor damage mitigation after the armor break of the attacker is applied, which is a different term. In general, I don't use more terms. So those few terms are some that you should keep in mind and that I will refer to during this video. So what is the difference now between damage reduction and armor? Well, the main difference, of course, is holy damage. While holy damage can bypass armor, it cannot bypass damage reduce. So that is something you should keep in mind. That being said, most heroes nowadays don't have a lot of holy damage. That was a thing during the time when we had light heroes. We had Gurki, for example, and you can see holy damage 65%. Everything he does basically buffs his holy damage. But nowadays the biggest source of holy damage on most heroes is either an imprint or it is the light star spawn. And the light star spawn provides 21.4% for me with 119% holy damage buff. So there isn't really a whole lot of holy damage, meaning armor in general tends to be relatively effective. The other difference is damage reduction is not countered by armor break. And on that side, we now have to have a little bit of a talk. Because now we have extremely potent sources of armor break. One being this wonderful Spirit of Trial, which gives us armor break. The other one being this Spirit of Wraec, which I now notice is not level 140. Now it is, well, and you can see I have a very good star spawn here. I have 163% armor break, a wonderful green star. It gives me 49% armor break for every single hero. For shadow heroes, even 50% more. And that can be quite devastating. I want to show you that, for example, of an Ithaka. Ithaka is the hero that by far gains the most buffs from those heroes because it's a Shadow Assassin. Shadow Assassins gain the most buffs from all of these star spawns. The other one is also includes Assassin, and the main one includes Shadow. So on Ithaka we have an armor break of 121%, and I think he doesn't even have a passive. No, he has no armor break on the passive, so we have 120% armor. And this invalidates armor. I can tell you already, armor break has a cap of 100%. At 100%, it reduces all the armor the enemy has. There is no armor remaining. And this means that this Ithaka will essentially ignore the armor stat entirely. And some heroes nowadays can do that, which is makes the armor stat certainly a lot weaker than it was before we got star spawns, before we got those huge sources of armor break. So that is something to keep in mind. It's also a little bit balanced. While we can get higher armor stats, we also get insanely high armor break stats, and that counters itself a bit. 1% armor break essentially really negates 1% of the enemy's armor. And at 100% we negate 100% of the enemy's armor. And it is not quite that uncommon nowadays to have 100% armor break on the hero. We can easily achieve that on like Wraec Investor without armor break buffs, without even any gear on, apart from the shoes. She is at 55.9% armor, meaning that just equipping the armor break imprint will easily lift us above 115% armor. If she had like an armor break bonus stat, she would have 100% armor break all the time. So she would be armor ignoring in that sense. And that is something to keep in mind, and that certainly has an impact. So it's always a play together of the armor break and the armor itself. And this is now more valid than ever before, given all of those buffs we get from the star spawns. The question now is, of course, how does armor work? And for that, I designed a small Excel sheet. So let's take a look into that. Okay, now we can see it. And this is the Excel sheet that actually can calculate how much armor damage mitigation you have and how much armor break is needed to negate it, and at which armor break how much armor damage mitigation is in existence. And for that, two values are necessary. The armor of the hero that is attacked and the level of the hero that is attacked. And you can already see it's level 410, so X level are considered as normal levels for that, like in Tussibot, by the way. And we can get a grasp of the armor damage mitigation of a hero here. We saw the Wraec Investor, for example, before. She is level 500, level 400 plus 100 X level. And she had an armor of, what did she have? 7,682. Oh, not that one. 7,682. So if we tap that in right now, we can see it's quite substantial armor, 75.46% armor damage mitigation that we can see here. And if we take a look on in this little diagram, we can see the more armor break we have a linear correlation here. Every bit of armor break that we have, every 1% of armor break reduces the armor by a certain bit. There is an exception to that. We will later look at high armor heroes that actually go beyond the cap of armor, that reach the 90% cap and have even more armor than they needed. For them, that is another story. There, the relation is not every single piece of percent of armor break reduces the same percent of armor. That you can see, by the way, on the left side as well. 0%, 75.46, 74.71, 73.95, all the way down. If we scroll down at 100%, we actually reach 0. And from there on out, every single bit of armor break that we get doesn't have any effect. So 100 is indeed the cap, and there we reach 0 armor. The formula for that is also in that field here. You can see it's F3, so it is the armor divided by the level of the hero multiplied by 20 plus 180. The plus 180, this formula is not entirely accurate. The community came up with different formulas during the time. I tried it a little bit, and 180 for the most part was pretty close. I also tried 200. Sometimes it's 156 comes closest, then it's again 200, but there's also some all damage reduced in the game. So calculating with 180 is pretty accurate, and you come to good results with it. For the armor break, when we take a look at that, armor break, we calculate that in and reduce the armor with it. It's F3 multiplied by 1 minus A2, which is the armor break. So it's, let's say it's 1% armor break, then it's the armor multiplied by 0.99. So only 99% of the armor takes an effect. And if we have the same at 100%, it's 1 minus 1, so 0. It would be the armor times 0, negating all the armor. So that is the math behind it. I will also provide you this Excel sheet as a download, so you can use it yourself. You only ever have to adjust those two values, and you can get the armor damage mitigation for every single hero and the effect of armor break and all of that good stuff. So regarding the cap of armor damage mitigation, this is actually quite easy to prove, as we can nowadays, through train treasures and starsmans and everything, get heroes that have so much armor that they are actually way above the armor needed that you would require to get the 90% armor damage mitigation cap. And we can quite easily find out that this exists, because we now have this Wraec Investor, which is in a pretty bare bones setup. The armor break is at 6.9%, pretty low. That's only from one star spawn. If we now go ahead, we have a wonderful copy of LFA that was set up by Norman for me. He set up an X level 20 LFA, 12,880 armor, no monster involved. And if we now score a normal hit on this hero, just with our Confessor, no monsters involved. We can check that out. Bam, there it is, 1464, just keep that in mind. We'll now skip that and go back into Gate of the Void, where we'll actually find that my Shadow Star Spawn is at level 1. We will now go ahead and level that, which for whatever reason takes forever on LD player. So let me go ahead and do that. So as you can see, we now have an additional 9.8% armor break. We can check on the Ferric Investor again, because it is also visible there, of course. And there we see 16.7%. And keep in mind the first 4 numbers of the damage number we did with our last basic, 1464. You can scroll back to see the entire number. And again, we attack the same LFA on Norman's account. And again, I hope we don't crit. And there it is, 1464. No increase at all, despite us getting like about 10% more armor break, which means that the armor this LFA has is enough so that on the first attack it was over cap, and even if we reduce it by an additional 10%, it is still so much armor that it is still enough to reach armor damage mitigation cap at 90%. So we could pull that up a lot more, but we could also just check out my Excel sheet for that. And in there you can see as well how much armor this LFA needs to reach armor damage mitigation cap and how much armor break we would need to circumvent that. Okay, now you actually see the Excel chart I was talking about. And I already set up everything. You can see it's like 12,880 armor, level 420. X level are considered as normal levels, so an X level 20 hero is level 420. Without X level, max level is actually 400, so it's 400 plus 20, 420. And here we just see a diagram with the impact of armor break on armor damage mitigation. You can see it stays at 90% here for quite a long time. To be precise, it stays at 90% till we hit 40, which you can see right down here at the bottom. Bottom 40, it's 90%, and as soon as we reach 41, it's 88.57%, meaning that 41% armor break is required to have any impact on the armor damage mitigation that this LFA has. Until we reach 40%, this LFA will always take the same amount of damage from our basic attack, and this is quite easy to see in that chart here. Okay, and looking back at the game now, you can see I upgraded the Star Spawn for our armor break now to level 110, giving us 34.3% armor break, and that is just enough so that our Fairy Queen Vesser now has an armor break of 41.2%, which, if my math is correct, should give us a very slight damage increase, nothing substantial. Actually, if we reach level 100 or 100% on the armor break, our damage increase is quite substantial. It will triple or even quadruple our damage against this LFA. So keep in mind 1464 were the last 4 numbers the damage number started with, and now we have 1557. So a very slight damage increase here, showing that we are now indeed having the armor break on the Ferric Investor that we need to increase our damage against this high armor stat enemy. And also, of course, showing that the sheet I just showed you is correct as well. So let's now talk about X level and armor that we get from X level, because from X level you get armor. They didn't put speed in there for whatever reason, but we get armor. So a lot of people think X level actually increase your survivability, which in a sense is true, given that they grant HP, and HP is always a little bit more survivability. But they also grant armor, and as we got that instead of speed, people thought like, hey, maybe it's a valuable buff. Normal levels also give you armor, so it's not just the X level, it's normal level as well. And the thing is, well, it's not all that great. It's really not all that great. If you take a look at that DTV now, we have an DTV at level 7, X level 7. Meaning for our calculation, for our armor calculation, that DTV is actually level 407 at the moment. And he has an armor value of 4,806, which gives him an effective armor damage mitigation, as long as the enemy has 0 armor break, or an armor damage mitigation of 57.76%. And if we now level that DTV up, we can level him for 2 levels, let's say. Now he's level 409 and has 4,831 armor. And if we check that out, 4,831, level 409, 57.79. So an absolute minimal increase in the armor damage mitigation, which is mostly due that DH has to round it a little bit. There are some increases from my treasure train, and that leads to some varying armor damage mitigation. If we level that up one more level, we can check that too. 4,842. So 4,842 at level 410 gives us 57.78. So we actually reduced our own armor damage mitigation by leveling him up from 9 to 10 at that point. So it varies a little bit. It's usually around 57.78, 57.77, 79. Those are the values that you're going to see all the way up to level 100, which, yeah, that armor doesn't increase your survivability at all, because the armor that you get from leveling up a hero's X level is just there to compensate for the increase in level of that hero. If that armor wasn't there, leveling that hero up would reduce your armor damage mitigation. So due to that, and that level is a part of that armor damage mitigation calculation, we get some armor to compensate that, but it won't increase your survivability at all. Even though you see higher armor numbers, and with your armor buffs, and if you go ahead and you equip, like, I don't know, if you go ahead and you equip the armor buff and you see huge numbers, and multiply that, it doesn't matter at all, because you still have the same armor damage mitigation as if you didn't have those X level. So if we just did equip that armor buff on that same hero at X level 1, that would have given us the same armor damage mitigation with a lower armor number as doing the same at X level 10 now with that higher armor number. You always have to keep in mind that the higher your level, the more armor you need to get a certain armor damage mitigation. And that makes X level armor buffs sadly quite worthless. So your armor increase from X level is worthless, keep that in mind. You need other sources of armor. A very good source of armor, to say that, is, for example, in the treasure train. The treasure bonus that we have for warriors, 27%, that is something that you can see on DTV a lot, and that actually helps you. The X level, they don't. So sadly, those will just grant you HP and attack, and no armor damage mitigation. So that's about it for the armor stat. Basically, we talked about everything you need to know, where you get it, where it is applied, which damage it does reduce, and what's the math behind it. There was a lot of testing that needed to be done for it. And on this point, I want to thank OP Note 4 from my clan and OP Norman, both of which went to the stress of setting up heroes for me, which I can be quite annoying on that, I have to say it. I wanted very specific equipment, very specific gear, very specific imprints, and they were so helpful and really went ahead and made it possible for me to test, for example, against the LFA that we saw, or in the case of Note 4 against the Xiaohu, that had specific setups, and that helped me calculate all of that stuff that you saw in game, and helped me prove that, and helped me find out whether or not some of the formulas that we saw were correct. Another thing, I also checked out an old Reddit thread by Never Knows Best about holy damage. I looked at that part for some inspiration mostly. That helped a lot. I have to say, there are really some good old Reddit threads. Quite nice that people were testing stuff at that time so in detail and so greatly. So that is the first thing. Now, as a final conclusion, what should you take away? X levels are substantially weaker than most people think in terms of granting yourself survivability. If you level a Wraec up, for example, just to give him some more survivability, you should reconsider that and better use those X levels on tenants or on heroes that you want to deal damage with. And for those other heroes, stuff like Treasure Train is way better, can way easier grant them some sustainability, some survivability. And of course, this requires a little bit of money spent, but this is a way stronger way of going forward and dealing with that. In general, you just get HP and attack from it. Armor itself is a very strong stat. Huge damage reduction with the 90% that we can get over all the armor damage mitigation. And the only two things you have to consider while using this is, for once, it has a cap. There are big multipliers to it, especially in Treasure Train, that can bring you over this cap. And then we have Armor Break and Holy Damage bypassing it entirely. And then Armor Break negating the armor that you use, especially on high armor heroes. That can be a little bit of weird stuff. Maybe in the future we will see some boss or something like that that has huge armor, that has like 20,000 armor or something. And then keep in mind the sheet that you saw for the 12,880 armor LFA, where the first 40% of armor break didn't grant you any benefit. So in that case, we will want high armor break at that time. And also keep in mind that especially in PvP, people might run big armor break, but until they really do, you can maybe get a 15,000 armor hero or something like that if you can get those huge armor buffs going from Treasure Train everywhere. And there might be an option to actually get this 90% damage reduction into your game. And most people just have some armor break from their star spawns. If they don't particularly run it on their hero, they don't usually get past 50% armor break. And if you can get a hero with a large enough amount of armor, then you can negate the effect of this armor break nearly entirely and still have armor cap, armor damage mitigation cap at all times, which can certainly be quite huge and can be quite an interesting thing. So that all being said, we are pretty much done. I thank all of you guys for waiting. Thank all of the members for supporting the channel. And I want to wish you a great week, and we will see us in the next one.